When it comes to The Wheel of Time Season 1, it's very interesting because I don't like Season 1, but Season 1 and The Wheel of Time itself holds a little special place in my heart, seeing as how it helped grow my YouTube channel to the place it is now. My video on The Wheel of Time Season 1 is my most successful video on the channel, and I still get comments to this day, and it's great. And ever since I've joined the Wheel of Time community and I'm reading the books, I just love it. I love the Wheel of Time community. They're all like very giving, and I like the conversations that happen between us whenever we discuss the books. It's very fun, it's very interesting. Also, one of the cool things about my first Wheel of Time video is that Man Carrying Thing commented on it, which is just insane to me. I love his content, and I mentioned it, and then he comments on my video, and it was so cool. That was awesome. And I just love having the conversation with the Wheel of Time community. Like, it's just so fun. I still get comments to this day complaining about the show, and their complaints are completely justified. And the thing that I find funny about that video too is how I was annoyed with the show, and I hadn't even read a majority of the books. And the thing that I actually do find quite funny about that video is that I am annoyed in that video. I'm annoyed with this show. But the thing is that compared to the rest of the Wheel of Time fandom who have read these books over and over again, their anger is more justified than mine. At the time I recorded that, I think I was only like 5 or 6 chapters into Eye of the World, but I could already tell Eye of the World was better written than the show was. I'm currently nearing the end to book 7, and I'm actually really enjoying book 7, which is interesting seeing as how I actually found books 4 to 6 quite slow, and getting into book 7, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. The interesting thing I found was going back to Season 1 after having read a majority of the books, going back to Season 1 and seeing how they just massacred the characters, the story, the lore. It hurt. It really did hurt. Now, I'm going to be fair when talking about the show. I will obviously point out the bad when there is bad, but I will also point out the good, because there's not many, but there are a few good things in the Wheel of Time Season 1. Majority of it is bad, and we'll get to it, but there are good things as well. So, we'll start off positive. What did I like about the show? Yosha Stradowski is good casting as Rand. I like Yosha Stradowski. The stuff I've seen him in, to be fair, not much. I've only seen him in the Wheel of Time Season 1 and in Gran Turismo. He's really good in Gran Turismo, by the way. And overall, I like his casting. I think he would make a great Rand al'Thor. And seeing him in interviews talking about the character of Rand, he holds the character in such high regard, and I admire that. He's read the whole book series. I like that a lot. And overall, he is the perfect visual representation of Rand al'Thor. He looks great. He looks like the character. And I think when he's given things to do in the show, he does it well. It just sucks that they sideline Rand for a majority of the season until the end, where they kind of massacre his ending as well. And it's like, man, if only he was in a better Wheel of Time show. If he was in a better show, he would have been a perfect Rand al'Thor. Rosamund Pike is also good and solid casting as Moiraine. I really like her a lot. She brings a lot to the role. She brings a lot of gravitas to the show. I think she is great. And again, if she was in a better show, she would have been a fantastic Moiraine. In fact, while I'm at it, I think most of the cast is good. I think on paper, they would have been good and they fit their characters well. It's just that the writing for the show holds them back a lot. Also, a lot of the direction holds them back a lot. And if they were in a much better show that was more faithful to the story, but also the writing was just good, they would have been good casting overall, I think. I also like a majority of the aesthetics of the show. I think overall it looks nice for the most part. There are times where it does look quite cheap, but overall the design work is nice. The costuming design is nice for the most part. And overall, visually, it looks decent. Not the cinematography though. I have a mixed relationship with the cinematography, because this time around, looking at the cinematography, whilst I don't like the overall visual look to it, there are times where the color grading does look quite pleasing, I guess. It's mainly in the interior scenes that's when the color grading looks quite nice, but for the most part, I'm not a fan of the visual flair of the show. The highlights look blown out, it looks quite cheap a lot of the time, the camera movement looks quite cheap. I think for the most part, a lot of it is missing the grit and texture, but when it comes to the interiors, I like the overall lighting. And to wrap up my list of positives, Lorne Balfe's score is pretty good. I quite like it a lot, especially his main theme for the Wheel of Time. I think the main theme captures the theme and the idea of the One Power and of the Wheel of Time as a franchise quite nicely. It's epic, it's ethereal, it's kind of spiritual. I quite like it. So that's a majority of my positives out of the way. What we're going to do now is we're going to go through episode by episode and talk through all my notes, because I made notes as I was watching each episode, and I'm not gonna lie, there were times where I was watching it and it hurt. It hurt a lot.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
The prologue at the start of this episode is not very good. It does very little to build up the atmosphere, or the lore, or the world, and overall it just feels very rushed. The images we see on screen don't correlate to the things Moiraine is saying, and also Moraine's line of "the arrogance of men" feels very out of place.
Many, many years ago, men who were born with great power believed they could cage darkness itself. The arrogance.
Because not only is it kind of misandric, but also the prologue doesn't explain the context behind why she would say such a thing, even though what she's saying wouldn't make sense in terms of the book lore because Lews Therin sacrificed his life. But the show also fails to address and talk about the mistakes of Lews Therin. The following scene with Liandrin would have been fine on paper, except for the fact that the show fails to mention the two sides of the one power, the Saidar and the Saidin. Liandrin just walks up to the man going insane and goes, "You see, when you touch the one power, you make it dirty." But according to the book lore, that doesn't make any sense because there are two sides, the male side and the female side.
This power, it's meant for women.
The overall misandry and man-hating demeanor of Liandrin and the Red Aja is fine because that all stems from the book. It's just the fact that in context of the show, it doesn't make sense because they purposefully excluded mentioning the Saidar and Saidin, the two halves of the one power. And by excluding that context, it just makes Liandrin look like a massive misandrist because it's the writers trying to promote their radical feminist ideologies. Which overall is a problem of the show because their radical feminist ideologies don't make sense and in many ways their writing contradicts it. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Egwene's braiding ceremony is just such a random scene and it's such a waste of time because it doesn't really make much sense. She gets pushed into the river because, and the lesson she learns is that she needs to surrender. What? What does that have to do with her becoming a woman or becoming a wisdom? The casting for Rand and Tam is good. Again, Yosha Stradowski, I really like. And it's nice to see Michael McElhatton, Roose Bolton as Tam. I think he does Tam Althor quite well. I think he does a very solid job at portraying Tam for the very little screen time that he has. Okay, what is up with Rand and Egwene's relationship in the show? It just doesn't make any sense. In the first scene with the four friends, Mat goes, "Oh, Rand's just pining after Egwene." And then when Egwene comes back from her braiding ceremony, everyone's all celebratory except for Rand, who's standing in the corner pining after her. To be fair, so is Perrin, which, at least they were consistent about to a point. And then when the two are left alone together, they all of a sudden start talking, and then they start making out, and then they start having sex. And it's like, wait, what? Then they have a conversation where Egwene says that she wants to become a wisdom, and then in doing so she has to become celibate, which isn't a thing from the books, but okay, conflict for the show. And the main issue with that is that Rand is just okay with it, or he's not okay with it, and they keep bringing it up. This weird situationship between the two characters goes against the core concept of Rand and Egwene's relationship in the books, because in the book, specifically in Eye of the World, it's a naive innocence. The two like each other, but they also don't know where they want to go with that. But also, they are sort of promised to each other, and there is a mutual liking between the two of them. The thing that's also funny too is that in the book, they haven't even kissed, let alone thinking about the idea of having sex. Them having sex straight away in the show just takes away that dynamic completely, and it ruins it, to be honest. It was really wholesome and nice in the book. No longer is it this awkward country bumpkin hanging around his crush. Now it's just two people that like each other but then don't like each other, but they do like each other, and it's weird and complicated. I mainly don't like it because it goes against the core character dynamics the two had in the book, but also I don't like it in the show because it doesn't make me want to root for the two of them in the show either, because they've already had sex, they are together but they're not together, and I don't like how complicated and weird that relationship is because a lot of the episodes afterwards they just spend the time kind of complaining and whining at each other, and too much teen angst. I don't like it. Now, in my original video, I said that the Wheel of Time universe to me felt very pure, very similar to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings universe, and I wasn't a fan of the sex appearing in the Wheel of Time show. After having read the books, sex is a thing in the Wheel of Time universe. It is there in the books, but also it's done and written in a very tasteful way. This isn't very tasteful in the show. It's just two people that like each other but then don't like each other, and they're just casually having sex, and I don't like it because it's very complicated and it just brings up unnecessary and annoying drama. One thing I will say that surprised me revisiting the show was that Barney Harris's Mat was not as good as I remembered. In fact, he's a much worse character than I remembered, especially now that I can compare him to the character from the books.
You fully lost your mind.
The show makes Mat a more burdened, traumatized, sleazy character than he is in the books, and I don't like it. Book Mat is plucky and cheeky and roguish. He's supposed to feel kind of like Han Solo. "Hello there, pretty lady. My name is Mat from Cawthon. How about we play a game of dice, and then afterwards we can play a little game of Maiden's Kiss." That's Mat Cawthon. That's not the character I get in the show. In the show, he's just this whiny guy that's like sleazing about, who looks like a bum, who looks really unkempt and disheveled, and that's not Mat Cawthon. The writing in the show also doesn't do him justice. They make him very unlikable at times, and it's really hard to relate to him. Book Mat is awesome. Book Mat is cool and fun and funny and quick-witted, And he doesn't have that in the show. He's not very quick-witted in the show. He's just this awkward dude that like walks about acting all sleazy and is just like, come on, give me money for dice, please. I'm just Matt Coulter, I need money for that. That's not Matt. There is a nice scene where Rand and Perrin give Matt some money so he can buy his sister some lanterns for the festival, which is nice. But again, they don't need to do that in the books because that's not how Matt is portrayed. Matt isn't a sleazy beggar, but also his family isn't in disrepair. They purposefully make him come from a broken family just so we can relate to him. But I don't relate to him because he's kind of just a sleazy ass. And speaking of Perrin and Lila, just... oh god. The whole addition of Perrin's wife Lila is so stupid because him killing her makes him so unlikable, especially considering how he's tortured through it, but the show doesn't really explain why he's tortured about it. And then they also just butcher that whole subplot in episode 7 when they reveal that Perrin likes Egwene. But it's also, they kind of set it up, but they don't really set it up in this episode. It's like, Perrin gives Egwene goo-goo eyes, and then when he goes back to his wife after Rand's just like, go back to Lila, he goes back to his wife, and their relationship seems very strained, and it's like, what's going on here? I don't like this change because it makes Perrin such an awful person, because book Perrin is incredibly loyal to his wife. Obviously, in the book, he doesn't have a wife at this point, but when Perrin gets married, he's very loyal to his wife. It also doesn't help the fact that he kills his wife. Like, what? A tiny thing I will give props to the writers is that Lila is technically a character from the books, because when Perrin goes back to the Two Rivers in book 4, The Shadow Rising, he goes back and he sees Lila and goes, oh, this is a woman that I probably would have married one day. And when I read that, it kind of like blew my mind. I was like, oh my god, wait, she's actually a character from the books? That's insane. The Winter Night attack is also done pretty well. I like the look of the Trollocs. I like the practical use of the Trollocs. They look quite good and scary and intimidating. Though the thing that I just found weird was when Nynaeve got kidnapped by the Trollocs, I was like, why? What was the point? Why did we have to get rid of Nynaeve like that? There's no tension to it. It's just something that happens and gets resolved in the next episode. Moraine weaving and channeling the One Power and saving the Two Rivers, for the most part, looks pretty cool. Though there are times where the choreography looks quite silly. Like, she's just moving about and then she does like this weird move where she's like, it looks quite silly. Also, if the show is adamant on making these female characters look all strong and powerful and progressive, why did they nerf Moraine in the first episode? Her getting stabbed by a Trolloc blade was so pointless. It's because it just nerfs the character for the next 2 to 3 episodes. Also, great going, Moraine. You basically just destroyed half the village. Also, when the Emmonsfield 4, technically, because Nynaeve isn't here, but when they leave the village, why does nobody try to stop them? That's like the whole point in the book. When you get to the end of the audiobooks, there's an interview with Robert Jordan and someone from the publisher, and they ask him, oh, what made you write The Wheel of Time? He said, oh, when I was reading something like The Lord of the Rings, when someone like a Gandalf would show up and say, oh, come, let's go off on an adventure, and they leave without question, he went, that's not very realistic. People in the countryside would be like, oh no, how about you stay and have another drink? Come on, settle down. There's no point in going off on an adventure. That's the whole point of why Robert Jordan started to write The Wheel of Time, was that he was like, oh, I want to make my own spin on the Fellowship of the Ring. And so I just find that point in the show where the fact that the Emmonsfield 4 leave and no one tries to stop them, I find that so strange, because that's the whole core of the beginning of The Wheel of Time. Also, there are some moments in this episode that just give me a feeling of tacky filmmaking. Like, why are there 3 cuts to establish the fact that Rand drew his bow and pulled out an arrow? And another nitpick I'll have is the Heronmark sword. Them changing the Heronmark sword to a katana, it looks lame. In the book and various art, it's depicted to look like a two-handed falchion, or at least a scimitar, something with a more single-edge Asiatic design, but it also has a crossguard. And it just being a katana that they welded on a little heron mark on, it makes it look quite lazy and cheap, because you look at the artist renderings, it's a cool-looking badass sword, and when you see it in the show, it's just this cheap-looking katana.
The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend.
Oh, hey, look, it's the thing. She said the thing. She said the wheel of time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memory into myth and blah, 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 blah. When you get to the end of the first episode, the immediate thing that's really jarring is the whole mystery of who is the Dragon Reborn. Because one, in the book, it's not a mystery. It's fairly obvious that Rand is the Dragon Reborn. But it also very much screams this is the writers trying to force in and bake in a hook for the audiences to tune in for the rest of the series. who is the Dragon Reborn? You gotta keep watching and find out. I think it's a very silly and unnatural hook, seeing as how they had to literally change the book lore in order to make the mystery work. There's a scene where Moraine confronts Nynaeve and starts questioning her about this backstory, about how she was this orphan that was brought into the Two Rivers or something, and there's something special about her, which is just not a scene from the book. But it's also quite silly when you take into account the fact that the dragon can't be a woman in the book, it has to be a male channeler. Like, that's literally baked into several of the book's prophecies, but also a woman can't channel Saidin, it has to be a male channeler. Because the whole point is that a male channeler channels the one power and starts going insane because it's been tainted by the Dark One. Gosh, it's silly, it doesn't work, the pilot is the one that really infuriates me the most. Because this is meant to be the start of the show. This is supposed to be the episode that establishes a lot of the fundamentals of the world that obviously you can expand upon in the later episodes. But they just get the basics wrong right from the get-go.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Okay, first things first about episode 2. But my son!
But my son!
The Taran Ferry scene is unintentionally hilarious. It's so funny. It's also bad from a writing standpoint because it does butcher the character of Moraine, but just, it's so funny. They cross the ferry, the ferryman's all like, we have to go back, my family's on the other side, they're gonna get killed by the Trollocs, my son will be back any minute. But the man just rattles on about his family and the Trollocs attacking his family for like a good 20 seconds. It's just funny. They cross the river, the Trollocs are there, and he's like, my family's back there, my son's gonna be back any minute, we have to help them, we have to go back. And it's like, shut the hell up, man. Oh my god. The scene ruins Moraine because she destroys the ferry with the whirlpool, and then the ferryman jumps in to get his ferry, and Moraine doesn't save him, which is just, what the hell, Moraine? Like, what? Like, she technically resulted in the man's death even though she didn't, but why didn't she save him? It would have been a different story if the man jumped in and then she pulled him out with the one power and then saved him. She doesn't do that. She just lets him drown and die. No, it's because the writers need to force in this fake conflict between the group and also highlight the moral ambiguity of Moraine because, Moraine bad. Also, going back to the ferryman.
But my son!
The ferryman's an idiot. If he saw the Trollocs on the other side of the river, how the hell does he think he's going to get past them? But also, if the ferryman's wife and his son sees the Trollocs on the other side of the river, if they go straight towards the Trollocs, they're idiots. They were smart, they would turn the other way and wait for, the Trollocs to disappear. What's he going on about? What do you mean I have to go back and warn them? How are you going to get past the Trollocs?
But my son!
Look, as I've said before, I like Josta Stradowski as Rand, but in this episode, he's quite whiny. He's always just complaining about his relationship with Egwene and how, you made your choice that we shouldn't be together, blah, blah. And all the conflict between the two of them is not very great to watch. It's very annoying and very teen drama-esque. You're being a right bastard to Moraine, Rand. Why don't you just go? All about going. Nah, I'm good. I don't need this in my Wheel of Time show. Now, the scene where they meet the White Cloaks is a good scene, apart from the one fact of why didn't the White Cloaks just ask Moraine, is she an Aes Sedai? Because, obviously, if she's an Aes Sedai, she's compelled to tell the truth, so she can't lie about that. Like, that's the thing. It's a good scene, and I like Moraine's answers, her using her words to trick the White Cloaks and getting around their questions. It's just that, if I'm a White Cloak, the most obvious question and the first question I'd ask is, are you an Aes Sedai? Also, when it comes to the White Cloaks, I'm not a massive fan of their costuming. For the most part, it looks kind of cheap. They just have, like, the one single pauldron, and it's quite cheap looking. They're just wearing white. It's not that great. This episode probably also has the best moment throughout the entire show, which is the Manetheren song and Moraine's monologue. It's really nice world building, and Rosamund Pike really sells that monologue. It's interesting to listen to. It's nice, fascinating, interesting bits of fantastical lore. Long ago. And the stuff they do at Shadar Logoth is done pretty well for the most part. They obviously exclude Mordeth, but other than that, the way they depict the taint and the way they get separated, I liked it.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
On paper, I get what this episode was trying to do, but for the most part, I don't think it works. I think it's quite a boring episode, and also, it does a lot of character assassination in this episode. By the time this episode ends, I think a lot of the characters are just awful people. They really just butchered Mat in this episode. Matrim Cawthon would never steal from dead bodies. He's not a thief like that. He's just an awful person in this show. Like, Book Mat would never do that. Like I said, the show's just turned him into this sleazy ass. Like, I get that Mat, in this point, is possessed by the dagger. But even still, in the books, the dagger just made Mat irritable and sick for the most part. The show just uses the dagger as an excuse to make Mat look like an asshole. I'm also not a massive fan of this show's characterization of Tom Merrilin. I like the actor, and I think if the actor was given a good script and better direction, and his character was actually portrayed as the character from the book, he could have done it fairly well, because there are times where he has to play the hardened side to Tom Merrilin, and I think he does that very well. In fact, when he plays that side of Tom, he reminds me a lot of Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn, and I think he's really cool. But Tom Merrilin is supposed to be a showman, a gleeman, an entertainer. It's literally in the name. He's meant to spread glee to people. He's supposed to be big and bombastic and upbeat, and in many ways I imagine him to be like P.T. Barnum from The Greatest Showman. Hugh Jackman would have been a phenomenal choice to play Tom Merrilin. But the show instead just makes him this edgy, moody, grungy cowboy with this song that... It's a good song to a point. I like it, but I don't like it in the context of the show. If Tom was to sing this song in, say, book 3, season 3 or whatever, that would make sense because at that point in the book, Tom goes through a bit of a rut. But at this point in the story, he's supposed to be big and bombastic and an entertainer. He's supposed to be like Jaskier in The Witcher season 2. The color of his morning. Overall, I just don't think they did the character of Tom Merrilin justice in this episode. Also, the fact that he just lets Mat take the money from the dead body is just... What are we doing here? The character in the book is supposed to be a mentor figure to the group, and he doesn't mentor them at all. Also, he is an asshole as well because he steals Mat's money for no reason. He pickpockets the pickpocket who pickpocketed Mat, but then he just takes the money going, thief for the gleeman. What? No, that's not what the character's like in the book at all. He wouldn't do that. He's supposed to be the protective, paternal-like figure for them. In fact, in the book, he was with them at Beltane because he traveled to the Two Rivers to perform at the festival. So he was with them at this point in the story anyway. And then in the show, they introduce him and they make him an asshole. And whilst, yes, at the end of the episode, he tries to give Mat his money back, but Mat's already taken it, he still just comes across as an asshole for no... Why did they do that? How am I supposed to like these characters if you just make them bad, awful people? Now, the whole part of the episode where Rand and Mat deal with the Dark Friend could have worked, except for the fact that it's not done super well, and a lot of that has to do with the actress they cast as the Dark Friend. I like her performance throughout most of the episode. She's good, but when she has to be the big scary Dark Friend, she's not very big, and she's not very scary, and she's not very intimidating. It also doesn't help that it makes Mat and Rand look like massive cowards when they're just running away from this, like, 5'3" woman with a sword, when if the two of them, like, really tried, they probably could have taken her. Because let's be honest here, if the two of them actually worked together and actually took her down, they could have done it fairly easily. The thing is that this subplot could have worked well, seeing as how a majority of Mat and Rand's chapters in The Eye of the World are dedicated to them going from town to town, running away from Dark Friends. It's just that it's not done very effectively in the show. Also, there's a moment in the episode where Rand is flirting with the barkeep and they're talking, and she suddenly just thinks Mat and Rand are gay, which... that doesn't make any sense. The two were just arguing, and she's like, oh, I thought you two were gay because you two were arguing, and it's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, I'm not purposefully trying to dumb down the dialogue, but that's literally what it boils down to. She tries to kiss Rand. Rand's like, oh, no, sorry, because it's all like, oh, yeah, I love Egwene. And she was all just like, oh, sorry, thought you and your friend over there might have been a thing. What? Also, speaking of Egwene, the whole Nynaeve Perrin Egwene subplot in this episode is fine, whatever.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
A lot of the reason why I don't really like this episode that much is because a lot of it is just fan fiction nonsense that doesn't add to the overall plot. The whole Loghain subplot in this show for me is just a massive waste of time. And if this was done in a later season or it flowed more naturally into the plot, I wouldn't have minded. It's just the fact that this episode just wastes a bunch of time doing a lot of silly nonsensical things that just don't really add anything. Because the flashback at the beginning of the episode where Loghain assaults Caemlyn is very cool. I quite like it a lot. But when it boils down to the character of Loghain from the books, and especially at this point in the book, he's not that important yet. At this point in the books, Loghain is just here just to show the fact that there are other male channelers that are claiming to be called the Dragon. I like the actor, I think he does a good job, and I also like the way that the show visually depicts his madness, making the weaves of faces of people that are talking to him. That's cool. But overall, the Loghain subplot is pointless and doesn't add to the overarching story for the season. Also, the battle in the woods where Loghain's army tries to rescue him doesn't look very good. It looks very cheap and looks like a very bad fan film. The way the camera moves, the way the scene is lit, it's very uncinematic and just doesn't look good. Also, Nynaeve can just apparently heal everyone. Like, I know in the books Nynaeve is a very powerful channeler when she's angry, but she can't reverse what is essentially death. Like, Lan gets, like, stabbed with, like, a blade through the neck and he's, like, bleeding out. Most of the people in that room were all mortally wounded, and Nynaeve, because she's angry, can just cure them all. Like, what? And speaking of Nynaeve, her relationship with Lan is done okay, I guess, though it's a bit weird too, where they have to go through this whole bit where Lan's just like, help me save Moraine, and Nynaeve's just like, no, I'm gonna let her die, and then Lan's just like, please save Moraine, and she's like, fine. It's weird too, because Nynaeve would have helped Moraine either way, because that's her job. She's a wisdom, she's a healer. I'll tell you what though, the Rand subplot in this episode was decent. I liked the stuff where Tom and him were talking about Mat being sick, and possibly Mat being a male channeler, and then he tells a story about his young nephew Owen and how he was still by the Red Aja. That's good stuff. That's done fairly well from the books, and it's done well on screen. And I liked the scene Mat had with the farmer's daughter. That was a cute, sweet scene, and I liked the fact that they added in the context of Mat's family from earlier on in the season, although I don't like the change they made to Mat's family. But the fact that Mat is a kind, gentle soul to young people is nice, because it comes from the fact that he's nice and kind to his younger sisters. That being said though, the main issue I have with the Mat and Rand subplot in this episode is the fact that they get rid of Tom Merrilin just like that. We've only known Tom for about an episode, and even still, he was an arsehole throughout half of that episode. And then in this episode, just as we're starting to like him, they get rid of him. It doesn't make sense from a narrative and storytelling perspective, because we're supposed to understand and like Tom. Tom is supposed to have been with them from the very beginning, and so the fact that he is barely in the show and he leaves after like an episode and a half is dumb. It's stupid. It doesn't work. We haven't spent enough time with the character, so his sacrifice doesn't mean anything. The scene with Perrin and Egwene and the peddlers is done fine. It's fine. It's the stuff I vaguely remember from the books. The stuff with like Egwene is dancing with Aram has a like hidden meaning in the show now, because Perrin fancies Egwene. And in the book, that scene does happen, but it's more the fact that Perrin's like, hey, what are you doing? You're with Rand. Stop doing that. The main issue I have with this episode is that this is the start of the show's trend of just having unnecessary subplots that aren't in the books, that waste time, when they should be using this wasted time telling the plot points that they aren't acknowledging from the book. And the reason why they should be doing the stuff from the books is the fact that, one, it's an adaptation, so you should be telling the stuff that's in the book, but also, the stuff that's done in the book is written in a more engaging manner than the stuff the writers are coming up with.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
I find the 1 month time skip to be very annoying, and that's mainly because that's my favourite chapter in The Eye of the World. The chapter where Mat and Rand are going from farm to farm, doing busy work, and being able to stay inside the farmers' houses, and there's one farmer that lets them stay, and then they entertain them because Tom Merrilin has taught Mat and Rand his gleeman tricks, and then the farmer's daughter fancies Rand, and it's kind of like all uncomfortable, but it's also like sweet and tender and kind of funny. It's a great chapter, and they cut it. They just skip through it. Why would you do that? It makes their arrival at Tarvalon, even though it should be Caemlyn, feel very rushed, especially since in the book, whilst I do think them running away from Darkfriend goes on for a bit too long, them arriving in the place they're supposed to be, Caemlyn, Tarvalon, whatever, feels earned. It makes them feel like these kids have been on the run and now they've reached a place of safety. Also, they just brush over the fact that Rand is supposed to meet Elaine in this book, because like that's like a thing. It all like links into things. Rand's supposed to meet Morghese and Elaine. There's a reason why they should have done that scene. But speaking of scenes that they did do from the books, the scene with Loial is great. I love Loial. Loial is the GOAT. The way he looks in the show is it's not great. His face doesn't look organic to me. It feels more like a wooden mask than like actual flesh. Though I do admire and appreciate the fact that they attempted to recreate Loial through practical effects rather than just making him CG. I also really like the actor for Loial. I think the way he delivers Loial's lines is perfect, and it's the character from the book. And this scene is from the book when Rand meets Loial. It's a very nice, fun, and engaging scene, and the show does it well, except for the fact that it's fairly rushed. I genuinely wish it was longer, because it's such a good scene and it feels so much like the books, and just, why did we waste so much time on this Logain stuff when we could have like seen Mat and Rand interacting with Loial more? Also, they said blood and ashes. That's great. That's really cool. That's a thing in the show that I'm glad they included, because I won't lie, in the previous episodes when they kept using swear words like, oh, you're a right bastard, Padan Fane, and oh, you're such a bastard, Rand, and you're such an ass, it didn't work. I didn't like it that much. To me, it just made the characters feel and look unsympathetic. But the fact that they're walking around in this episode going, blood and ashes, that's cool. That's like the fantasy stuff I liked in the books, and it's nice to see it in the show. I wish they did it more. Now, the subplot with Perrin and Egwene and the White Cloaks in this episode is, it's pretty bad. So, there are two reasons as to why Charles Valder takes Perrin and Egwene. One is the fact that they saw them twice, which is just What? And the second reason is the fact that he thinks Egwene is an Aes Sedai, even though he doesn't know that she can't channel, and he also thinks that Perrin is her warder. What? Also, Perrin purposefully lets himself get tortured because he thinks he needs to atone for the crime of killing Lila, and it's just... this is so dumb and so stupid. Why? Perrin shouldn't have a wife at this point in the story, and also, I can't relate to the fact that Perrin killed his wife, because he shouldn't have killed his wife in the first place. Also, because Perrin is so stoic and quiet like he is in the book, I don't feel sympathetic towards him. I don't feel like he's really processing or internalizing his wife's death. It just doesn't feel satisfactory. I don't feel like this is coming from an emotional place. I don't feel sorry for this character. Especially as later on we find out that Perrin likes Egwene. The thing is that the reason why the White Cloaks take them in the book just makes more sense. One of the White Cloaks kills a wolf, and then Perrin gets mad and kills a White Cloak, and so the White Cloaks take them because they feel like Perrin needs to atone for his sins. And also, the actor that plays Child Valda isn't very threatening. His screen presence isn't very threatening, and he just looks like a weak coward, especially when Egwene breaks out of her bonds just magically, and then he drops the knife, and it's like, what a wimp, what a... Now, granted, his character is a bit of a sleazebag in the books, but even still, when it comes to the show, if you're gonna have Child Valda be the White Cloak that's threatening, it's not very threatening. It also doesn't help the fact that the actor I recognize from Love Actually, and in that film he's like the film assistant guy or something, and he's just this very like meek British man. But to me, the biggest crime of this episode, the worst subplot of this episode, is the stuff to do with Lan and Steppen and Moiraine, just because... oh god, it's bad. It just destroys Lan's character. First off, Moiraine and Lan just abandon Perrin and Egwene for no reason, which is just dumb. In the book, the whole point is that Nynaeve tracks Lan and Moiraine, and then they go off to find Perrin and Egwene and rescue them from the White Cloaks. Not to mention the fact that in the book, Moiraine has given them all a coin, and the fact that Perrin and Egwene are the closest is the reason as to why they go after Egwene and Perrin. But in the show, they're just like, oh, we'll find them when we find them, and it's like, what? The whole point is that Moiraine is supposed to go after these kids because she thinks they're the dragon, and in the show she just abandons them for no reason. Also, in this episode they mentioned the Forsaken, but not really. It's very shallow and very surface level. They don't really explore the fact that they are still around and they actually play a significant role in the world. They don't really address any of that. They just go, oh yeah, they're servants of the Dark One. And Steppen also has a shrine for the Forsaken or something, but it's like a shrine to ward off the Forsaken. What? Also, the show continues to confuse Ishamael for Baalzamon. Now, in the books, there is a reason as to why they may be hinting at that, but when it comes to the show, they keep interchanging Baalzamon and Ishamael as one and the same. They keep going, oh, the Dark One, Ishamael. I remember the Dark Friend in episode 3 says that, and I'm like, that's not who the Dark One is, though. Also, Steppen isn't even a notable character in the book, so why is this whole episode kind of dedicated around him and him suffering at the death of his Aes Sedai and him killing himself at the end? What's the point? This is just wasted time that could have been better spent off elsewhere. We could have had Elaine and Morghese in this episode, and, you know, Garwin and Glod. No, we don't have time for that. We need to focus on Steppen and him crying about his dead Aes Sedai. And worst things worse is that the funeral scene is just a massive character assassination for Lan, because it just goes against the core of his stern exterior. In the books, Lan is this stern, hardened warrior warder, and he has this philosophy that he tells Rand in the book. There's one rule for being a man: whatever comes at you, face it on your feet. And in this episode, when Steppen dies and they're at his funeral, Lan just falls to his knees, rips open his shirt, starts screaming at the sky and pulling at his nipples, and it's just a massive character assassination. That isn't Lan. Boy, what a great show, what a great adaptation and real faithful adaptation this is to the books. Look at all these great changes. What are they doing? What are they doing?
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Episode 6 is mainly the Suan Sanche based episode, and to be honest, I didn't like it all that much. I'm not a fan of this characterization of Suan. The opening flashback about her backstory was a waste of time, because apart from the fact that we know that as a child she was sent away by her father to the White Tower, that's kind of it. We don't know who attacked them, we don't know why she left her village, and also the scene where she says goodbye to her father is just, it's so stupid. The writing makes no sense. Dad, come with me. No, child, I can't. Why not? Because I can't. But why? Because the fish cannot touch the moon. What? What is this writing? This is like on the same level of Rings of Power with the whole why does the stone float and the boat sink?
Scratch that, reverse it.
Why does the boat float and the stone sink? And again, similar to the Steppen thing, this whole backstory stuff focusing on Suan is pointless and a waste of time because it detracts from the overall story of the Emmonsfield 5, but also from Rand, because at the end of the day, what does this add to the story? Us knowing about Siuan's backstory adds nothing to the show. Now, circling back to the mischaracterization of Siuan, I'm not a fan of the actress's portrayal of Siuan in the show, and especially the writing for the character, because to me, it doesn't feel like the Siuan Sanche I know from the books. Performance-wise, I think the actor's a bit all over the place, and it's not their fault because I've seen this actor in other things before, and I think she's very good. But in The Wheel of Time, the way she's been directed, the way Siuan has been characterized, I'm not a fan of it. She seems very all over the place. You can see it most in the scene where Egwene and Nynaeve talk to her, where the two walk in and Siuan has this false, sweet, sincere demeanor, and then all of a sudden she drops it and becomes really pompous and really cold and really snobby, and it doesn't feel organic. I go, what's up with the direction here? Why does she just switch like that? Now, Moiraine and Siuan being a couple in the show, to me, doesn't inherently work. Now, I haven't read New Spring, but from what I've heard, in New Spring, Siuan and Moiraine are, like, together in more of, like, an experimental way. And in the show, I think their relationship detracts from their best friend dynamic. And I think that might just be due to the way it's characterized, because when they're together, it feels quite boring. It feels quite stale. I go, this isn't a very interesting relationship. Because in the books, especially in book 2, when Siuan and Moiraine meet, Siuan is all high and mighty and, oh, I am the Amelin seat, you will obey me, you will call me mother. And then as soon as, like, everyone leaves the room and it's just Moiraine and Siuan, the two drop the act and they act like giggling schoolgirls and best friends. Another part of this episode that I didn't like and felt very much like artificial drama was the sequence where Moiraine is expelled from the tower, because Moiraine realizes that she can't do her duty, and the Amelin Seat realizes she can't do her duty without all the other sisters conspiring against them, and so she expels her from the tower, and Moiraine can never return because she's sworn on the oath rod that she can never return, and so that frees up Moiraine to go off and find the Eye of the World with the Emmonsfield 5, and it's like, wait, what? Why does Moiraine have to be expelled from the tower to do that? Why can't she just, sneak out of the tower? Why does she have to be publicly expelled? When it happens in the show, I just go, this is artificial drama. This doesn't really mean anything. They have Rosamund Pike being all teary-eyed, and it's like, why? Why is Moiraine being expelled? She can just sneak out of the tower. Again, it's artificial drama. Why is this in here? We don't need this. Anyway, so Moiraine leaves the White Tower, heads off to the Waygate where everyone is all reunited. And the thing is with the Waygate is that, one, they get it wrong from the show, because the whole point is that Loial has, like, the leaf key, and then Loial opens the Waygate and helps them go through the ways. But then in the show, it's like Moiraine just opens it with the power, which then leads into the biggest plot hole of the next episode, which is when the gate closes, and everyone's all like, oh, open the gate again, we need to bring Mat back. And then Moraine's just like, I can't do that. But then if she can't do that, how did she open the gate with the magic? What? Another issue I have with the Waygate 2 is that whilst I think design-wise it looks nice, it's just they plopped it in the middle of this field, and there's no set design around it. They literally just took the thing, plopped it there. There's no, like, vines growing or bushes or bracken growing around it. They literally just plopped this big statue thing in the middle of a field and called it a day. And it just looks cheap and lazy. Now, the handling of them leaving Mat behind was done really badly. And the thing is, I understand the situation was horrible, but there could have been ways you could have reshot around it, or you could have edited around it, and just, it doesn't work. And the worst thing is that you can make it work. There are ways to have fixed this in post, because the way it plays out in the show, Matt's just standing there. They're all like, Matt's not coming through. Wait, guys, wait, Matt, come through, Matt, quick. And they just have this B-roll of Barney Harris just standing there going. I remember when I first watched it, I thought, oh, Matt's joking about not wanting to go, because obviously that would be very in line of Matt's character, but then he just doesn't go through, and it's like, you could have easily fixed this in post if you just done some post-production effects, put on like a filter or something of Mat being possessed by the dagger, and everything would have made much more sense, but they didn't do that. And because they used B-roll of Mat just standing there, it looks goofy. They're all just like, Mat, come through, Mat, quick, come through, quick, Mat. He's just standing there. It's... Thing is, I understand this is a horrible situation, and I shouldn't give them too much flack for it. But there are ways they could have made this sequence work and make more sense within the story.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Episodes 7 and 8 might actually be my favourite episodes of the season, and it's not because they're good. It's just because they're both entertainingly bad that I kind of enjoy them. Specifically Episode 7. Episode 7 is where all the dumb melodrama happens, and it's hilarious, and I love it. It's so funny. Now, on rewatch, the Tigraine fight is not nearly as bad as I remember it being, but I still don't think it's great. I do think that it's a failure of the show and the writers for not properly establishing the ferocity and the awe and the awesomeness of the Aiel within the context of the lore. If the writers had properly foreshadowed the Aiel within throwaway lines within the other episodes, like, oh, you wouldn't want to get into a fight with him, he fights like an Aielman, or, oh, they've got a rage like an Aielman, or you wouldn't want to mess with them, they fight like an Aiel, or the Aiel is super dangerous. If they just had lines like that sprinkled organically throughout the show, it would have worked so much better, so that when I see the Tigraine fight as a new audience member who didn't know the books at the time, I wouldn't have been confused and thought that the thing looks awful. Some of the fight choreography looks a bit too big, some of the wire work feels too big, it feels more like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon thing, when that doesn't really fit the tone and style of this show. There's also just the numerous amounts of times where Tigraine stabs people straight through plate armor and it just looks stupid and goofy, and it's like, how? That's metal on metal, that's not how that works. And speaking of the actor that plays Tigraine, I do think at times her acting doesn't really sell the effort and pain enough for me, to where she's screaming, but I don't feel like she's really screaming. I'm not in the scene that much. Also, the pregnancy bump looks awful. The way it moves about, it literally looks like they just got a watermelon, stuffed it under her shirt, and it's just wobbling about as she moves, and it looks stupid. On paper, the scene isn't bad, but I do think it's a failure of the show for not properly foreshadowing how dangerous and fearsome the Aiel are, and also, it's just not really well executed. Episode 7 is also the episode where they really just throw Mat under the bus. Like, they really just destroy his character. The writers just have characters constantly shitting on Mat, going, oh, he's such a horrible person, he's always evil. They even go to the extent of having Moraine go and say to Lan, oh, there's always been something weird about Mat, he's always had an evil aura around him, we've always known since the beginning. Why would you do that just because you don't have Bonnie Harris? Why would you throw Mat as a character under the bus like that? They all know that he's possessed by the dagger, but why are they acting like Mat is just this horrible evil person? It doesn't make any sense. I remember back in the day when I made my rewrite for season 1 and I said, oh, I'd keep all the stuff Marcin Shin says to them in the ways because I think it's fine. Now I changed my mind, just do the scene how it's done in the book, because in the show, it's just the winds going up to them and telling them the truth, just going,
hey, you suck. Hey, you're the Dragon Reborn. Hey, you killed your wife.
It's kind of goofy looking back at it. It's just, nah, it doesn't work. Especially seeing as how Moraine goes, don't listen to what Marcin Shin says, whatever it tells you is lies. And it ends up telling Rand that he's the Dragon Reborn, and Rand's just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna accept that as fact now, even though Moraine said that, don't trust anything the wind says. Okay, so when they get to Faldara, the issue I have with Lord Algamar is, why do they make him so confrontational? Especially in the writing. The writing makes no sense. Moraine starts talking to him, and then all of a sudden, Lord Algamar just starts going, oh, why are you here, Moraine Sedai? Oh, actually, no, I'm gonna guess why you're here, just because I'm this toxic masculine man. And it's like, why? Lord Algamar wasn't like this in the books. Why did you write him like this in the show? Is this supposed to be the writers showing the arrogance of men and the patriarchy? Because, yeah, fuck patriarchy. What are we doing here? I do not like the casting for Min. She is way too old. Min is supposed to be around the same age, if not a bit younger than Rand. And just seeing that the fact that in the show that she looks about like 10 years older than him, it throws off their future dynamic massively. Like, what are they doing? If the showrunners really liked the books, why do they go, yeah, we're gonna make Min just like so much older than Rand just because... Why? Now, getting on to my favorite sequence in this episode, the melodrama between Rand and Perrin and Egwene is hilariously bad, and I love it. Their arguments are so petty. It's just Rand going, Egwene, you know all about leaving people, you left me, and Egwene's like, Mat left us behind, Mat's a horrible person, and Rand's just like, shut up, stop talking bad about Mat, and then Perrin's just like, stop talking to Egwene like that, I love her, Rand, you can't talk to her, apologize. It's so bad, but it's so funny. And the thing is too, is that Perrin having a secret crush on Egwene just completely makes him an awful person, especially considering the fact that he killed his wife, and the fact that Rand comes to the conclusion that Perrin married his wife when Egwene and Rand got together. It's just funny. It's just... oh, God, it's so bad. Perrin gets all up in Rand's face and just like, the only woman I've ever loved is my wife. Then why are you looking at Egwene like that? Another thing too about this episode that I don't really like is that they really keep pushing the fact that Rand and Egwene are this dream couple and that they're meant to be, they were always meant to be, and I don't like that, especially considering how, as the books progress, Rand and Egwene's relationship isn't that important. I could be wrong though, I'm only halfway through. For all I know, it does go full circle and like they are like the end goal or something, but at the time and at the point I'm reading, Rand and Egwene aren't really the one true pairing. And speaking of relationships, Lan and Nynaeve's relationship to me doesn't really work. And that's not me saying that the show is doing it worse than the book, because also in the book, I'm not like in love with Lan and Nynaeve's pairing. It gets better as the book goes on, and the thing is that the show is literally lifting dialogue from the books when it's the scenes between Lan and Nynaeve. It's just that I don't really feel it. I'm not really invested in their relationship that much in the show, but also I'm not really that invested in their relationship that much in the book. That being said, book 7 has changed my mind on that a little bit, but even still, there are better pairings in the Wheel of Time. But hey, by the end of the episode, we find out that Rand is the Dragon Reborn, even though Rand shouldn't believe that Marchin Shin told him that he's the Dragon Reborn, but even still, Rand is the Dragon Reborn. We finally solved the mystery, even though it wasn't a mystery in the book, and it never was a mystery. What was the point of the whole of this? Just focus on Rand and make him the Dragon Reborn from the get-go. Also, a thing that's really annoying to me is that the show keeps saying that the Eye of the World is the Dark One's prison, when it's not. That's Shayal Ghul, and Shayal Ghul is like way further ahead in the land compared to the Eye of the World. That's not what the Eye of the World is. Why do they keep saying it's his prison? Like, that's just not true.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Okay, so episode 8 alongside episode 7 is also probably one of the most entertaining episodes of the season, even though it's not great. It's pretty bad, but it's entertainingly bad. The Lews Therin flashback that opens the episode isn't great. All it boils down to is the ambulancy of the time calling Lews Therin arrogant, and that's it. Like, really? You're not going to adapt the prologue to Eye of the World, one of the most iconic parts of the book? You're not going to adapt that? Why? That's when you think Wheel of Time adaptations, right? Most of the fans want to see the prologue to Eye of the World depicted on screen. And the show doesn't do that. What are you doing? What? The prologue to Eye of the World is one of the most hooking prologues I've ever read. And they just chose not to include it in the show at all. Like, what were they thinking? Also, another reason as to why it's stupid for them not to include the prologue to Eye of the World in the show is the fact that the prologue demonstrates just how powerful and dangerous the dragon can be. Lews Therin kills his entire family because he's gone mad, and he's confronted by a Shamael, and is taunted by a Shamael, and throughout his grief and anger, realizing that he's killed his entire family, Lews Therin sacrifices himself, he kills himself, and creates Dragon Mount. That prologue immediately sucks you into the plight of the dragon, and lets the audience know that the dragon needs to be found, and needs to be tutored by the side of good, and not be corrupted by the side of the dark, because the dragon is immensely powerful. But in the show, the dragon doesn't really feel or look very powerful. When Rand does his big stuff at the end, it's not very big, nor is it very epic, because they take away all of his big epic stuff and give it off to the ladies. I will say a cool part of the Lews Therin flashback is that they do showcase the idea that the Wheel of Time takes place in the future, and throughout the various turnings of the wheel, the world has regressed back into a more medieval Renaissance-looking era. That's kind of cool. The battle at Tarwin's Gap visually isn't great, nor is it shot very interestingly, and also they kill off Lord Algamar for no reason. What was the point? What is it with this show and killing of characters we've just been introduced to and acting like their deaths are really significant and really important? Also, when you look at the bigger picture, Rafe Judkin's feminist message isn't very consistent in this show. You look at Lord Algamar's sister, for example. She's driven by power, she's driven by lust, and as soon as she goes towards the power and the greed and the lust, she burns out and kills herself. Alongside all the numerous other channelers, but hey, it's okay, don't worry, Egwene can heal death. What would they think? What a stupid show. You know, I thought the whole idea of women empowerment is to show that women are really strong and that they're really capable and that they're just as powerful and strong as men. But the show just depicts them as weak and feeble, and they get easily corrupted and are just easily destroyed and are very fallible. It's just, what is this messaging? They aren't different from the male characters in this show because everyone in this show is horribly written. They're all driven by power, they're all driven by greed, and they're all arrogant. Also, a thing too that's really jarring is how Perrin does absolutely nothing in this episode. He spends the whole episode whining and complaining that he's doing nothing, and he doesn't do anything. He's like, I want to fight, fuck the Way of the Leaf, and then he goes forward to, you know, stop Padan Fain, and then he just does nothing. Padan Fain stabs Loyal for no reason. Then they take the Horn of Valyr and then just fuck off, and Perrin does nothing. He just stands there. Could have at least summoned some wolves or something. Also, where is Perrin's axe? That's his whole, like, moral quandary in the books, whether he should be consumed by his dark thoughts and his violence and his anger and go forth and be the protector and also be the aggressor, or whether he should be the peaceful protective lord. To me, this just shows the fact that the writers don't understand the fundamental core of their characters, because Perrin's axe is significant to his character. It's the perfect metaphor for his character, and they don't use it. Now, everything with Rand and the Blight and them at the Eye of the World is just a massive downgrade from the books. Look, the Blight itself is stupid because Moiraine's just like, oh, don't touch it because if you touch it, you'll be consumed or whatever. And there's no real defining characteristics of the Blight to where when Moiraine and Rand stop to sit and sleep, there's no indication that the land around them is safe to sleep. And Moiraine just goes, yep, we can sleep here. It's safe. It's fine. And at the Eye of the World, it's really boring. Rand gets there, Rand gets trapped by Shamael, he's in the dream world, he sees his dream future with Egwene and Joya. Joya is a nice reference, that's cool, but even still, as a whole, the concept is boring and generic. Because all it boils down to is the fact that Rand goes, oh, this isn't what Egwene would have wanted, and they uses the Sangreal and then blasted Shamael, and then Shamael smiles and disappears, and it's like, this sucks. Especially when you compare it to the books, it sucks. This sequence doesn't make Rand look powerful, or cool, or scary, or mad. It just makes him look like a massive simp. And the thing is, the climax of the show just sucks. When you compare it to the book does it better. First off, in the books, everyone goes to the Eye of the World. Loyal is actually important and guides them to the Green Man, and then the Green Man guides them to the Eye of the World. And then at the Eye of the World, they're confronted by the Two Forsaken, Agenor and Balthamel. Everyone gets defeated by them except for Rand, where Rand suddenly channels the massive pool of Saidin that is at the Eye of the World. And also, that's what the Eye of the World is, it's a massive pool of Saidin. Rand channels all that Saidin, basically goes into God mode, destroys Agenor, destroys Balthamel, destroys all the Trolloc army at Faldara, summons a bunch of lightning, and just goes mad with power. People call the ending to Eye of the World a Deus Ex Machina. I don't really think so. The ending to the Eye of the World signifies just how dangerous and powerful the Dragon Reborn can be. And that the person who is the Dragon Reborn can either be an incredibly evil person or has the potential to be an incredibly good person and use all this incredible power for good. We as an audience are supposed to feel all these mixed emotions about Rand because we don't know whether or not he's going to become a good or bad person. But also, this was Rand channeling without even knowing how to channel. And this is how powerful he is. So if Rand can tap into his powers properly and channel properly, how dangerous and how powerful can he be? You don't get that in the show though. He just looks like a massive simp. He just goes, poof, and all of a sudden, oh, I have to go now. I'm feeling a bit mad. I need to go. Bye, Moiraine. Tell everyone I died. It's so rushed. Why does Rand go, I need to leave everyone. I'm gonna kill everyone because I feel mad now because I channeled once. What? I do not buy in the show that Rand was wrestling with this feeling of putting all of his loved ones in danger. I don't buy it. He just channels once and then goes, oh, I'm going a bit mad. Bye, Moiraine. Tell them all I died. It's so dumb. And speaking of dumb, Shamael shielding Moiraine from the One Power was just... Why? Again, Rafe Judkins, you say you're a feminist, but why do you keep depowering all these female characters and making them look all weak and vulnerable and foolish? I get that in Season 2 they need Moiraine to do something, seeing as how in the second book Moiraine isn't really present, but you could have written up something else. You didn't have to depower her like that. Especially considering the fact that Moiraine in the books would never have allowed herself to be in a position where she would have gotten shielded like this. Also, the placement of the Horn of Valor in this episode is stupid. If the Horn of Valor is in Faldara, why did nobody in Faldara blow the horn? The whole point of the Horn of Valor is that people go off in search for it. It's like the Holy Grail. People go on pilgrimages, they go on crusades, all in search for the Horn of Valor so they can summon the heroes of old. In the book, the Horn of Valor is at the bottom of the pool of Saidin in the Eye of the World. And so when Rand channels all the Saidin, they find the Horn of Valor and then they take it back to Faldara and then the events of book 2 happen. And so the thing is, if the people of Faldara already had the Horn of Valor, why didn't they blow the Horn of Valor? What are these writers thinking? Have they even read the books? I've only read it the one time and I already know that that's a massive plot hole. Why the hell would they have the Horn of Valor and not use it? Also, how does Padan Fain have the dagger? Because the last time we saw the dagger, Mat had the dagger. But then all of a sudden, Padan Fain in this episode has the dagger and... Huh?
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
So that is the breakdown of all the episodes. God, why did I have to rewatch this? I think the main point I took away from this rewatch of The Wheel of Time Season 1 is that the show ranges from either being painfully generic, to painfully boring, to painfully bad, to hilariously bad. And look, there are some good things sprinkled throughout it, but for the most part, the show isn't very good. I really hate seeing the wasted potential because I like the cast, I like the aesthetics for the most part. Granted, cinematography is not my favorite, but I like overall visually what the show is presenting. It's just that the writing is crap. The show just doesn't focus on Rand al'Thor, who is the main character of the book series, but also is the main character of book 1. Them changing Moiraine to be the main character of the first book doesn't make any sense and doesn't work in the narrative of the show, because Moraine in the book is just designated to be the wise mentor figure. She's the Gandalf, she's the Dumbledore. She doesn't really have her own major subplots in that book. And the subplot she is involved in is to do with finding Egwene and Perrin, which she doesn't do in the show because she goes off to the White Tower and to do all this stuff with Logain, and this is just so pointless. This is not in the book. This doesn't happen. What are you wasting your time for? I also think the biggest mistake of the season was the whole who is the Dragon Reborn mystery, because one, it's not a mystery in the book. It's very clear that Rand is the Dragon Reborn from the get-go. But two, when it comes to the characters in the show, I'm not invested. I don't care about the mystery because I barely know and understand these characters. And from the little I do know about these characters, they're all for the most part assholes. Also, you know the writing for the mystery is terrible when the writers had to purposefully remove the scene where a wounded Tam al'Thor deliriously tells Rand that he isn't his son. They omitted the scene from the first episode and then shifted it along in the story and had it be one of the flashbacks that Ma Shin reveals to Rand in the Ways. If the writers had to purposely remove a key piece of information and evidence that indicates that Rand al'Thor is the Dragon Reborn just to make their mystery work, then it's a terrible mystery. Another one of the massive failings of this show is the deviation from the books. Look, I understand that in adaptations you have to make changes, but when the changes detract from the quality of your story and are wasting time to pad out the runtime, why are you padding out the runtime? You have at least 1,000 pages to work with. You have so much material to work with, and the show doesn't do that. The show wastes time showing off backstory for Logain that isn't necessary for the story of the Eye of the World. The show wastes an entire episode on this warder who barely has an hour of screen time, and so when they die, I don't care. But also, they're not even a big part of the story or of the book or of the show. They just show up, and then they're there to die. And I don't care. And again, this is really annoying because the potential of the show is very good. And the thing is, I like most of the cast. Look, I know there are some audiences that don't like the fact that it's so racially diverse because there's no cultural hegemony within the world or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me that much because when I read the Wheel of Time books, a lot of the names to me don't sound like white names. Like, Perrin Barra to me is not really a white sounding name. I know Robert Jordan did this like massive fan cast list of all the actors he wanted to play the characters, and Val Kilmer as Perrin, I don't really see. I mean, I understand that it's the author's depiction of the characters, so I'm not saying that he's wrong, but to me personally, Perrin Barra isn't a white-sounding name. Nor is Nynaeve Almira, Zareen Bashir in the later books. For the most part, these aren't white-sounding names, so them going out and getting multi-ethnic actors to portray these roles, it's fine to me. It doesn't matter. But also, at the end of the day, the actor is just there to bring the character to life. It's not their fault that the show is crap. It's the writer's fault. Look, do I have my little aesthetic nitpicks with the cast? Yes, I don't like the fact that Perrin's hair is a bit too short. By the end of the season, his hair is at a nice length. Same with Rand. I don't like the way that Bonnie Harris is costumed as Mat. He looks really grubby and messy and not like Mat from Cawthon. Daniel Henney is good as Lan for the first half of the season until they butcher his character. But even still, I think Lan should be bigger and should have longer hair. I don't like the weird like top knot ponytail he has. His hair should be long. It should be like the longer version of Jon Snow. Or it should be like Geralt of Rivia's hair. But that's all superficial. The main issue with The Wheel of Time Season 1 is that the writing is crap. Now granted, I cannot blame them entirely for the Barney Harris situation. That in itself is a crap situation and I do feel bad for them. But again, there were ways they could have fixed that situation in post. They just didn't. And overall, when it comes to the showrunner's reaction to the backlash for Season 1, I found Rafe Judkins' comments on the situation quite immature. Now granted, Rafe did claim that he did get death threats. Fans don't send death threats. That's just dumb and stupid and a waste of time. But his response to that I thought was fairly immature, where he was like, they don't like the show we made? Fine, we're just going to ruin it even more. We're going to make Perrin gay. We're going to make Lan gay. We're going to do all this dumb stuff to annoy the fans. And that's not what you're here to do as a showrunner. You're here to service the story that's supposed to have been told by Robert Jordan. And you're supposed to bring Robert Jordan's stories to life. And the thing is, Rafe does genuinely believe that they made a fantastic show, which I don't understand. You read their comments about Season 2 and how they're talking about Season 1 and all the groundwork they did. They're all like, you know these characters. We did all the groundwork. We established the world. No, you didn't. You really didn't. You can't say that, especially considering the fact that you didn't even properly establish the two sides of the one power. That in itself is a failure of the show. The fact that the show itself doesn't mention the words Saidin and Saidar specifically and talks about the one power as two sides, that to me shows that you haven't done the groundwork. You don't respect the lore, you don't respect the material, and you don't respect the audience to help them understand that there are two sides to the one power. But then again though, on this rewatch, when I finished episode 8, they played a sneak peek of season 2, and the clip they showed was a clip from the Dark Friend social. And I'll tell you what, it was actually kind of decent. Recently, I've been watching the interviews that have come out for season 2 with the cast, namely the stuff with Yosha Stradowski and Rosamund Pike, and the thing is, a lot of the stuff they're saying is very promising, but then also some of the things they said don't fill me with confidence.
Is with a new friend, Errol, who he takes care of in a place with with people who struggle with their mental health. A new friend, Errol.
Who the fuck is Errol? I don't think the name Errol has been uttered once in these, but who the fuck is Errol? That doesn't fill me with confidence. That makes me think season 2 is going to go the way of season 1, where they're just going to deviate from the book and tell this random, boring bullshit subplot. But anyways, to wrap things up, those are my points as to why The Wheel of Time season 1 is awful. It's not a good adaptation of the books, and hell, if I'm just taking the books out of the equation, it's not a good show. It's not enjoyable to watch. The characters are horribly portrayed. They're all assholes. The writing is goofy and silly and all over the place, and there's just a lot of bad and goofy and silly moments. It's not a good piece of fantasy entertainment, let alone a good piece of entertainment. It's not good. The show doesn't do justice to the material it's based on, and overall makes the Wheel of Time universe look bad when it isn't. It's incredibly complex and detailed and interesting to a certain extent. But those are just my thoughts on the Wheel of Time season 1. What do you guys think? Did you guys rewatch season 1 in anticipation for season 2? Are you a fan of season 1? I know there are some people that do like season 1. I don't understand that personally, but hey, more power to you. Are you excited for the Wheel of Time season 2? Do you think season 2 is going to be better than season 1? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. Until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time. But my son!